Hello, everyone, and welcome to an introduction to the board game Successors. This introductory video is going to show you the components of the game, as well as give you some of the historical context for the game, and explain some of the victory conditions. I'm here in Tabletop Simulator, and we're going to just look at the different components that are part of this game. This is a 4-player game. You have 4 different players. Here is the blue player card, the green player card, etc. And each player is going to have this card, and they're going to place combat units on these numbered squares on the card. And those combat units, they get trained, and when they get trained, they move up to the next number on that square. When they reach the 3 square, they can become a mercenary unit. When they reach the 7 square, they can become what's called a Macedonian unit. Every player controls 2 generals, and these are actually the main components of the game in terms of how you make actions and create and execute decisions. Every general has a name and also has several statistics. One, the circle on the left with a number in it, the white circle, is called the initiative rating, and then the square with another number in it on the right, the gray square, is called the command rating. So Krataros has a 4 and a 4. Generally, for initiative, you want them to be lower. Lower is better. For the command rating, you want higher to be better. Some characters also have a pink box there. So, for instance, this is Eumenes, the satrap of Cappadocia, and he has a pink box that says -2p. That refers to popularity. He is unpopular, so he has -2 popularity, whereas Ptolemaeus is +2 popularity and Krataros is +2 popularity. Each player controls 2 generals, and those generals are starting somewhere on the map. Basically, what Alexander the Great did, he dies in Babylon, which is right in this area. Perdiccas is now in Babylon. But he dies in Babylon, which was the capital of the Persian Empire, which he took over. Alexander the Great was from Macedonia up here, with the capital Pella right here. And but when he died, he had set his generals in charge of different provinces within his empire, and so they're often called satraps, which simply is the Persian word for a governor or an administrator. So, for instance, Python is over here in Media, the province of Media, and so none of these generals are kings, and so the point of the game is to either acquire victory points or legitimacy. So let's just go over legitimacy first. You acquire legitimacy by controlling heirs to the throne or women who were prominent women connected to Alexander the Great. What a legitimacy victory essentially means is that you are seen as the legitimate heir to Alexander. And so you don't have to use force to take over the empire. People accept you. The Macedonians accept you. Potentially some of the other generals and leaders of Macedonia accept you. And so to do that, you have to get 18 legitimacy, which is not easy to get all the way over here. You start out with 3. And there's a variety of conditions that give you legitimacy. The most basic is that everyone starts out with 3 because they are what is called a champion. A champion is someone who has not tried to usurp the throne yet from Alexander's legitimate heirs, if there are any. So a champion is not seen as a threat to Alexander's dynasty. They're carrying on the tradition and they're just helping Alexander's heirs rule, because as it's going to turn out, he's got, each of the heirs has potential heirs has kind of problems with him. One of them is an infant, one of them is mentally incompetent, etc. And so if you can acquire control of so you start out with three. Now, the problem is you lose that every time you attack another champion who isn't the usurper. The usurper is the character with the most victory points. And so at the start of the game, that is Ptolemaeus right now, because he starts out with 8, and no one else starts out with as many victory points. You can see these square boxes, these orange square boxes tell you how many victory points you receive. Basically, anything that's orange is going to tell you victory points. So because Ptolemaeus starts out in Egypt or Aegyptus, that's a wealthy and heavily populated province, and so it gives you more power to control that. Babylonia is 4. Most provinces you can see here are 1 or 2. There's a handful that are 3. Phrygia is one of them. Macedonia itself is only 3. Thrace is 3. But Hellas or Greece is 6. And so whoever starts out with the most victory points is the usurper. And you can attack them without losing your status as a champion. The problem is, if you attack any other player, you lose your status as a champion and you lose 3 legitimacy and you can never get it back. Um, there are a number of ways to acquire legitimacy, and I won't go through all of them right now, but basically you have to control the heirs of Alexander. You can also bury Alexander. This is his funeral cart right here. It starts in Babylon. It has Alexander's body in it. And so you can bury it in a major city. And if you bury it in any random major city, you get 2 legitimacy. If you roll the cart all the way over here to Pella, which is the capital of Macedonia, you get 10 legitimacy. And realistically, that's your best way to get to 18. But I won't go through all of those right now. Um, so let's just look at some of the other components to the game. This is the turn track right here. There are up to 5 turns. A lot of people will play a 4-turn game, which is a little bit shorter, obviously. These things, these symbols tell you what can or can't happen on any particular turn. Um, you've got also very important is political control markers. So you can see when these generals start out as the satrap or the governor of a province, they have their control marker here in these squares. So I guess first we should actually talk about the squares themselves, okay, or the spaces as they're called. They're called spaces. So the circular spaces are small cities, the square spaces are major cities, the hexagonal spaces are called strongholds. They're not heavily populated, but they're fortified. And then these little uh, circular dots here are called transit points. And you have to move across the transit points, but nobody can control them. They're not very heavily populated areas. And so spaces are also divided into provinces. So the spaces are the circles. The provinces are the shaded areas. These shaded areas right here. And to gain the victory points of a province, you have to control a majority of the spaces in that province, including the major city if there is one. So, for instance, in Phoenicia or Phoenique, you would have to control 2 of these 3 yellow spaces, including Tyros or Tyre. So if you controlled Tyre and Sidon, you would control Phoenicia. But some spaces, for instance, Syria, don't have a major city. So to control Syria, you would simply have to control a majority of these 4 spaces. And then when you control that, you gain you should gain there's cards that correspond to those provinces that you can draw. And I don't see them here. Here they are. So uh, I haven't actually dealt out these, but in the physical copy of the game, you can see here, whoever controls Syria, for instance, will take the Syria card and put it into their hand. And this is a very easy way to know how many victory points you have because it says it right there. 2V means 2 victory points. And so you'll distribute those cards to everyone as they acquire provinces. And of course, if somebody conquers a province from someone else, they would hand over that card. All right, so political control markers are these colored discs. You can change the control of a province. If someone, conquers it, you can also remove it by simply taking it off and placing it back in this player's, uh, stockpile. Um, but political control indicates that a player has control of that territory or not that space, whether that's a minor city, major city, whatever. Um, and then there's also combat units. So uh, right now, combat units haven't been dealt onto the game, so I'm going to just show you what some of them look like. Here's there's a mercenary. This is a loyal Macedonian. Let's just zoom in on these. So you can see these are square and they have two numbers on them. They've got a bigger number that's not in parentheses and they have a smaller number that is in parentheses. The bigger number is the number of units of that type that counter represents. So if it says 1, this represents 1 mercenary unit, and you can there are some that have 2. There should be some with 2, um, but I guess in this digital copy they're one-sided. But in the physical copy, you can flip it over and it'll say 2. The numbers will go up. The number in parentheses is the combat strength of the unit. So for the mercenaries, the combat strength is equivalent or equal to the number of units, but the Macedonians are twice as powerful. So the combat strength is usually double the number of units. So 1 unit of loyal Macedonians is equal to 2 units of mercenaries in terms of combat strength. So these armies are going to be put onto your general's card. So let's say Crateros had 2 mercenaries um, and a loyal Macedonian unit. You would simply put those on his card. You can stack them if you want to, or you can put them by his card, however you want to do that. But these units are with Crateros, and then Crateros and every other general has a marker or a counter on the map that shows his location on the map. And so those units move around. Now you can leave units in a space, and so you would simply take them. Let's say you left this mercenary unit here, you would simply take it and place it on that spot, and it is now in this city. So the way the apart from legitimacy, the way to win is to acquire victory points. So this track right here counts your victory points. I haven't actually distributed these tokens yet, but players are going to start with about 4 to 6 or 8 victory points. You get victory points, as I say, for conquering provinces. There are a couple of other things that can give you victory points as well. So, for instance, if you control all of these kind of orange provinces, Phrygia, Syria, and Babylonia, you will actually gain, it's called the Master of Asia, and you gain 4 victory points for that. So, um, that's an extra way to gain victory points. You can see here, it's the 3 provinces that have this little square around, um, in a diamond shape instead of a square shape for the victory points. Another way to get victory points is to control all of these blue spaces. Um, most spaces are kind of gray-ish, but the 5 spaces right around here are blue. And if you control them, you get, I believe it is 2 or 3. You would get 2. It's called the Hellespont, so you get 2 victory points for that. So there are other ways to acquire victory points, but the primary way is through conquest. That's the main way that you're going to get that. And it depends. So in a 4-player game, you can see the 4 down here. 4-player game, you need 23 victory points to win the game. These gray counters are independent armies. So like down here, they represent Greeks in Hellas. Um, Over here, they would represent native tribes or just native peoples out here. And so it's harder to conquer areas that have a an independent army marker or an independent control marker. You have to roll a die and siege them if you want to conquer them. And so some spaces obviously are empty. Those are spaces that don't have any enemy units in them, and they're relatively easy to conquer. Okay, so these counters up here represent all of the different heirs you can control or the women you can control. And so when you gain control of them, they many of them are located on the map. So for instance, here's Heracles. Um, I think that was the illegitimate son of Alexander, and so you can control him. And so the main point of the game is to move your generals, to move your armies, to conquer territory. And then the final component of the game that I want to share are the Taiki cards. So the Taiki cards are kind of special actions or special events that can take place in addition to kind of regular movement and battling. And so each Taiki card has some kind of number. Most of them have some number at the top left. That's called the op number. Op stands for operations. And so that number you want higher. Higher tends to be better. They let you do a couple of different actions on the board. Some cards have a crossed swords icon. That's called a surprise card, and they aren't played as a regular action. Rather, they're played during another action to kind of add a different effect. You play them kind of as a surprise, and then the yellow or the cards with a yellow border on top and then a plus sign are called bonus cards. And so when you play the bonus card, you can play the action or the text on the card, and then in addition, you can also play the op number. Whereas with the gray cards, you simply have to choose whether to use the operations value or the text on the card. So every turn, players will gain a hand of 7 different cards. Okay, there's these triangles are called siege points. When you besiege a city, some of the larger cities require that you roll, and siege points represent progress in a siege, progress in kind of surrounding and starving and just getting over the walls of a city. You've got some counters that give you extra popularity, so characters that become more popular will gain these popularity counters. Um, you've got different kinds of combat units right here, uh, including elephants. There are a handful of elephant units there. This is the first player icon. Whoever is the first player is the lowest victory points, is the first player every turn. And so they're going to get this icon, and then you go clockwise. Um, you've got dice, uh, and I think that's pretty much it as a general explanation of the components. There are other generals that you can control. So you can see some of them out here. When you control them, you simply take the card that represents that general and you place it, in your box over here. So you would, if I controlled Polypercheron, or whatever, Polyperkin, you would just place him over here in your box and move your other generals over. It's somewhat rare to, control a lot of generals, but you start with two and you can sometimes get more. Okay, I think that's one last thing. There are fleets. Um, Here's a couple of markers that either increase or lower your legitimacy. So that's also, you might put those markers on a character. So let's say Ptolemaeus got something that had -2 legitimacy. You would put this marker over here to represent the fact that he, has lower legitimacy, at least for right now. And then the fleets. You can see there's 8 fleets, and fleets help protect your armies as they're moving across the water. Um, they have they're double-sided. Oh, well, you can upgrade them. So they're supposed to be there's a stronger side and a weaker side. But in the digital version, it looks like it's a little bit different. You can see on the map there's these fleet icons on the map at different provinces. So Cyprus, Phoenicia, Aegyptus, Cilicia, Hellas, um, Caria. And so when you control that province, you gain control of that fleet. And so your fleet strength is kind of how many fleets you control. And those fleets can actually, the fleets don't move on the map, they don't go out anywhere. Rather, they can intercept armies that are trying to move across the water. So the more fleets you have, the easier it is to intercept other people as they're trying to move across the water on these kind of lines that go over the water. Okay, I think that's a pretty good introduction to the components of this game, Successors.